Hi, and welcome to this video in the MRDCL Understanding Concepts series. And in this video, we're going to be looking at character variables. You'll find the files that are referred to in this video in the folder DAT107. So we're going to start by just looking at some data that's got some character variables in it. But I'm going to start by just mentioning a few things about character variables and their limitations. There's a temptation sometimes to think that you can analyse text in MRDCL, and that is true, and there are deep variables that allow you to pick up text strings, but it is a little bit limited. It really isn't for doing text analysis, and it really only works best where you just want to push back out the text that you've picked up, or perhaps where you can meaningfully combine codes together, and probably where the text actually has some meaning. So if you look at this data here, you can see I've got some flight codes along to the right hand side there, like BA241. That is something that means something and couldn't be typed or entered in any other way. Where text doesn't work for analysis is where you perhaps ask someone where they live, and that if they've typed it in themselves, they might put New York as two words. They may put NY, NY for New York State. They may put N York. They may put in the text, let's say New, and then lowercase York. And all of those, if you were going to do analysis of those in MRDCL, would need picking up separately, because MRDCL has no way of knowing the difference between NY and New York without you actually typing in exactly that text string. So there are limitations. It's okay to push the answers back out either to a spreadsheet or as a report in a table, but probably most text analysis you're going to do, or tables you're going to do from text in MRDCL, are where the text means something. And again, you can see in that data, like an airport name, LHR is London's main airport, BKK is Bangkok Airport, HKG is Hong Kong Airport, and so on. All right, so let's have a quick look at this data that we have here. You can see we've got 4 records in the file, and there's a serial number at the beginning. There's a couple of codes here, as in normal sort of research data. And then starting in the 8th field, we've got some text, which is just effectively a greeting or something like that, or whatever someone wants to say. It's only there for illustrative purposes. And then there's another longer text field here, which runs up to column 50. A 3-letter airport name, and then along here is a flight number, which is interesting in the sense that it has different numbers of characters after it. So there's a 241 following it, a 3211, and a 21 here, for example. So we're going to look at perhaps processing some of that text and some of the rules. The maximum length of a text string that you can pick up in MRDCL is 255 characters. That's the limit that you can process. So let's look at the variables that we could define from those text strings in MRDCL. So I'm going to switch to an MRDCL script, and the first one we're going to pick up is that welcome code, the hello, which was in field 8 to 20. So I've got a character variable here, DC means define character, which picks up the value of welcome, and it picks it up from 8 to 20. And there's a title to follow it. There's no other text following it. The next one we pick up is an opinion that someone had, which was in 21 to 50. So that's another text field. As I say, that could be up to 255 characters. Then we have one which is probably a bit more meaningful, which is the city. So that's picking up the 3-digit code, the departure airport. And so that's probably something that is a bit more easy to work with, because the letters or the combinations that can be picked up are fixed and are meaningful, in the sense that BKK means Bangkok. There's no other way of abbreviating Bangkok Airport other than as BKK, or to be correct, it's not. If you wanted to group together all the airports in Thailand, for example, you could pick up a string of all of the 3-character letters in a variable that picked up any airport in Thailand. And then here we pick up the flight code, as 71 to 76, which is that last field where we looked at the flight code. And you can see you can bring together sort of mixed variables here, where, for example, you can say that if 71 to 72 is BA, I want to pick up the flight code in 73 to 77. So let's just quickly relate that back to the data again. So what it's saying is if these two digits are BA, I want to read that flight code number there so that I can do some analysis from it. Now, you have to do something extra there because text is generally left justified, not always, but usually left justified, and numbers don't usually have trailing blanks. You would need to put in the F equals ATF statement, which means that you accept trailing blanks in fields, so that when it picks up the actual flight code, if it is BA in 71 to 72, the flight code is in 73 to 77, but it's accepting trailing blanks. Otherwise, when we look at this data here, it would read those digits there with the blanks on the end and say that that's a failed field because it's not a numeric. If it's 241 blank blank, that wouldn't usually be accepted, but ATF would allow us to accept the trailing blanks in the field, and it would correctly read that as 241. Then we can pick up the airline, and there's a little bit of syntax here that's quite useful sometimes. The variable flight above picked up the whole flight code, so we picked up that whole flight code, which in the first example was BA241, BA3211 in the second case. And what we're saying here is from the variable flight, I want to pick up the first two characters and pick up some text. So if it's BA in those first two characters, I want them to go into the first bit of my single variable airline. So this is a single variable we're defining here. If it's CX in those first two characters, I want to pick up that, and the labels that we're storing here are British Airways and Cathay Pacific. So that's sort of picking up that data. Now what I've done down here is that I'm listing out the serial number and each piece of text just to check it's picking up everything correctly. So let's just have a look at that when we run it. And if we look at the report file, you can see now that it's actually correctly picked up all that data. So for serial number 1, IOBS means the serial number. The welcome variable was hello. The opinion, when this is a longer text string. The city was LHR. The flight code was BA241. The flight number, if it was BA, was 241 as well. And the airline is British Airways. And the way I've got that piece of text out there is when it's listing this, I put an ampersand on the front of the variable name so that it lists the response text rather than a code of 1, which is what it would have done by default. And then it's repeated that for respondents 2, 3 and 4. And you'll notice here that the flight code for the fourth respondent is 0 or blank. Because we haven't got IFB set, it's going to restore that as 0 because it wasn't a BA flight, and so it's not picking up the code for the CX flight 21, the very last record here that we've got, this piece of text here. It's not picking up the 21 for the CX flight because it's not a BA flight, and we only asked it to define iFlight underscore code if it was a BA flight. All right, so that's doing some work with variables and listing it out. You can do tables on these variables. There's no problem with that. You can produce tables like a value distribution table. Let's go down and do a couple of tables. So let's insert tables now. And we could say, for example, that table 1 is airline star comma, so we get a table of those British Airways and Cathay Pacific codes that are coming up. And we could do a value distribution table. We could, for example, do a table on, let's pick up the flight code itself, narrow it down, which is flight, and we can say there's 100 different answers there, and do a table of that. We can save it and close my data and just run that, and there's my records now. It tells me that table 1, where I'm tabulating the single variable where I picked up British Airways and Cathay Pacific, sure enough, we've got 3 British Airways flights and 1 Cathay flight. And when I do the table on all the flight codes I picked up, there they are, CX21, BA3211, and so on. So that completes this short video on how to handle character variables. Their use is a little bit limited, but nonetheless it's a good way of carrying data around and producing reports and listing things to a CSV file so you get meaningful reports that can be of value to clients to use in Excel. Thank you.